Of Jordan Hicks' situation, and just to update you on this, he will have Tommy John surgery tomorrow morning. Needless to say, very disappointing. He obviously was taking over that closer role for us, and certainly going to be missed. Next question is who's going to do it? And talking with Schulte, comfort level is to go with Carlos Martinez, and obviously then the order would just keep going backwards as you think about the bullpen. But good news is we have some depth there, and hopefully we can absorb it. But no doubt it's a loss.
How did the final decision that Tommy John, can you take us through that?
Well, so yesterday when we had with Dr. Paletta see him and review the MRIs, but then ultimately they wanted a second and third person to review it, so we went ahead with that process. So yesterday afternoon when we did make that announcement, we were still awaiting the second and third opinions on that, but ultimately we received those today, and Jordan and his agent decided they would have Dr. Paletta do the surgery tomorrow morning.
Have you talked to
a year from now till recovery?
I think it's a bit, that's historically typical, right? But why don't we allow the surgery to happen and see how that goes before we comment on when or how long.
Could you describe those?
I think he did on one pitch.
He didn't really describe it as necessarily that pop or feeling, but he just felt tightness, and unfortunately, it was damaged.
Have you talked to Jordan?
I did. I would say pretty good spirits, all things considered. Certainly bummed it happened, but I guess you have to look at it as a pitcher these days. It's part of the business.
Is he here? Or is he?
He's here, yeah.
Loki, the timing of this being in the mid-season, I know you can't say it's 10 months, 12 months, 13 months, but just to have him, you expect him then to come in mid-season. Have we seen that with the Tommy John guy? Just kind of arrive in the middle of the season?
I'd have to go back and look at my notes on who we've had that happen with, but I've got to imagine we have. Certainly having a rehab during a season seems to be logical because you have somewhere to pitch. And given the fact that he's not a starter, should allow him to come back at a quicker rate.
With Carlos, do you look at this as an opportunity for him to maybe, I say redeem himself, but maximize his impact on the team this year?
Well, I hope so. I would say that we were trying to stretch him out, giving him 2-inning opportunities, and I still wouldn't rule that out even in this role. Because as you look to next year, if we even want to consider him having an opportunity to be in the starting role, trying to gain some innings this year, however we do it, even if it means 8th and 9th or 9th and 10th, is something we have to consider.
Is there an update on Alex Reyes?
Yeah, Alex had a pectoral strain, and I would suspect he's going to miss anywhere from 2 to 3 starts. We're not overly concerned, but anytime you're not pitching is not good.
Do you have any new on Austin Gomber? Is he still viewed as, is that just shoulder soreness? I think that's what.
Yeah, I think he's progressing though, and I would say sometime probably around post All-Star break. Hopeful.
With all three of those things we just talked about, does that change the way you're thinking about going into July 31st at all? Does it feel more impetus to add pitching?
It always seems like you're looking to add pitching. So today's news doesn't help in that regard, or doesn't necessarily change how we're thinking. Now it's really see where we are in the standings and decide how we want to make that decision as we get closer.
Well, you guys have been critiqued sometimes being overly optimistic and then bad news follows. I don't know where you are that, like it was a cramp and then it was tendonitis. What do you think is fair? Is it the urgency to give some report early and then it gets bad later? What do you think is fair in terms of reporting?
I think fairness on this is we were overly optimistic, and then the dark clouds moved in. I would think, though, for the most part, we try to be, as transparent and honest as possible on these things. But, clearly on this one we were wrong.
Does that change going forward, or that you guys will not make any sort of initial assessment? Do you think
I don't think so. Obviously, when a player comes out of a game, you need to have some feedback, and then when you get to post game, most people in this gathering here is going to ask questions why or what's happening next. So I don't think it's going to change how we think about it.
Jordan said he passed most of, or I guess all of the tests that he took when he came out of the game. Is that atypical for someone who winds up needing Tommy John or is a torn UCL to be able to pass everything that's post-game like that?
I would say that's an outlier, yes.
Well, with Alex Reyes, that's about 3 injuries, all kind of related to that same area. Obviously, he's a pitcher, and that's a difficult job, and a good strain on the shoulder. Is there some connection to what's going on? Is there a mechanical thing, a training thing that he's going to have to look at?
I think we all need to look at that. I mean, from a coaching standpoint and from a mechanic standpoint, from obviously if I were the player, I'd be interested in what that might look like. So we have a little time to do so, and I think we will.
The surgery will be here in St. Louis, right?
Yes.
Is it 2-hour, 3-hour surgery? Any idea?
For Tommy John?
Yeah.
Historically, right around a little over an hour.
They're doing the full Tommy John, not the tack down.
Is Alex going to stay in Memphis or is he going to come back here for?
Right now, he'll be in Memphis.
On a different topic, the return of Stephen Piscotty, have you been able to visit with him at all and just thoughts on getting to see him again?
I have not. I've had a pretty tight schedule today, but I do hope to say hello and connect.
Do you ever think of what if, I mean, circumstances were what they were, but do you ever kind of wonder if you wouldn't have had to make that kind of trade?
I mean, look, I think every deal you make, you reflect on. But at the time, there were a lot of moving parts going on, not only in his personal life, but just with our club. And so, you know, I would say this. It's always best when you don't have to make trades. It's always best when you can keep players that come through your system. But, you know, unfortunately, the type of business we're in, it doesn't always happen.
Is he going to be out of the bullpen?
He'll likely be used out of the bullpen, but I wouldn't rule out seeing him in the rotation at some point either.
So a lot was made this year, heading into this year, about Marcel Ozuna. Can you describe how you feel about his play so far this year and what's impressed you, assuming you're impressed?
Well, I think his contributions speak for themselves. I think seeing him healthy has probably been the biggest change. But you're seeing a healthy, happy Marcel, and it's definitely one of the positives from our club.
Can you describe the importance of his power?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's just power, just his presence in our lineup. Especially when you have other people struggling, it's nice to see someone that's stepping up and giving you that type of contribution you need to try to find ways to win.
And on a different topic, do you have any communication with the people in your jobs with the Blues?
I know Mr. Armstrong. I don't talk to him all that often. Chris Zimmerman I would call a friend and talk to him much more regularly.
I guess what I'm getting at is, since they've won the Stanley Cup, have you communicated with them at all? And
Sure.
What has that been like?
Sure. I mean, obviously, a very exciting time for them, and I would imagine right now they're soaking that up and enjoying it. But it's funny, like I was reading the other day in your fine paper that they were talking about how quickly you go from parades to the draft or to free agency, and I can certainly relate to that because I remember in 2011, within 48 hours, Tony had stepped down, and then we probably had one of the more historic negotiations in this history with Albert Pujols. So, as I've always stated, success can be fleeting, and it's something that you embrace for its time, but it moves quickly.
How much better do you feel about the team right now versus like a month ago when you talked?
You're saying I didn't like the team a month ago?
No, they won 2 out of 3 series, or I guess 3 series
I'm
in a row.
teasing.
Okay.
Try to understand my tone, sarcasm, and wit. Look, I think we are playing better, but I don't think we're on all cylinders yet, and I still think there's room for this team to grow, which I think is positive given where we are in the standings. But to fans and to all of us, I mean, that's something you want to start seeing sooner rather than later, and hopefully we can continue that down that trend.
Does having only one trade deadline this year, or how would you say that might impact dealings just across the board of the league?
I would say there's a lot of finality then on July 31st.
As you start to get healthier in Memphis, is there some thought being given to maybe cycling a couple of guys up here to see if maybe there is a spark somewhere in there that can maybe get the offense going in the direction you want it to go?
I wouldn't rule anything out.
Tyler would be a guy in that conversation, Lane Thomas as well. Both guys who are getting healthy, maybe can contribute.
I mean, we also have guys on this team that aren't playing every day.
Sure.
So there's ways to cycle in lineups without necessarily going to Memphis.